You're listening to the Rock and Roll Show on BRFM 95.6 and also online. Tune in every Thursday night from 7 to 10 p.m. for your share of the hottest sounds around with your DJ and host, Rockin Dave.
There you go. I Fought the Law, Bobby Fuller, and the Bobby Fuller Four, of course. Now, we've got Robert Quirico on the phone. Hello, Robert.
Good evening, Dave. How are you?
I'm good. How is it over in America? How's the weather?
Oh, the weather here is, luckily in Arizona, it's usually real hot about this time, but it's, I guess because of climate change, it's getting a little cooler.
Yeah? Oh, it's actually
That's a good thing.
It's starting to warm up a little bit over here today, so it's good. Right, now let's get on with the interview. Now, where did it begin for you, musically?
Well, it began me musically. I started out playing baseball, and I was pretty good.
Yeah.
And I played semi-pro ball, and I decided I didn't want to play anymore because the guys coming in were way better than me, and I don't like sitting on the bench.
Yeah.
So I left. I was 18 at the time, and by leaving, it kind of freaked me out because I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself.
Mm-hmm.
So luckily, I had met a guy during that time who was from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he had a drummer that taught me a beat, and it stuck in my mind, and I moved on, and I went to visit my dad in Denver and decided to stay with him.
Yeah.
And I started playing drums because when I met this guy, this drummer showed me a drum beat. It was kind of like a boom, boom, bap, bap kind of thing, and I kept using it. So my dad bought me a set of drums, and I was just self-taught. I listened to the radio play, and I would try to copy what I heard.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived in an apartment with my father, and there was a payphone in the apartment in the hallway, and there was a drummer that lived there that was a country drummer, but he was a drinker and a womanizer, and he really wasn't a good drummer.
Yeah.
And this guy called, and I picked up the phone, and that's where the guy was there, and until he moved out. I said, "Why, are you looking for a country drummer?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I'm a country drummer. I've never played a gig in my life.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't even do it now, but I did." So I met the guy. When I met him to show up for the gig in Denver, he got out of the car. He was a blind piano player. His name was Earl Carmack.
Mm-hmm.
Chill guitar player. And the bass player was a kill drummer, but I didn't even know it. So I played the night, and I played 2 nights, 17:50. And it went well. I turned the meter around sometimes, but he helped me. He didn't kind of get mad or nothing. So about 3 weeks after that gig, I ran into him again, and he asked if I wanted to go to New Mexico.
Right.
And so I went to New Mexico, Albuquerque, playing as a duo, played at a place called the Town Bar.
Yeah.
I learned my first song, singing on the drums, 6 days on the road. And so I just kept doing it, and then I got involved in the country. I met a guy, and I went to Texas, and I met. It was I can't remember the name of the booking agency.
Right.
But anyway, it was. I got hooked up into country music, and I started playing country, and it was pretty simple because you don't play a lot of fills or anything because they'll kick you out right away. So I laid down the groove, and I was doing real well. And then I got into it with the guy I was with because he was a drunk, and he was doing things that I didn't want to be involved with.
Yeah.
So I left, and I went to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I ran into a bass player friend of mine, in the country business.
Yeah.
And then I was there hanging out with these players, and this friend of mine that I had met in Albuquerque was a guitar player who was playing with Bobby Fuller 4.
Right.
And he quit Bobby Fuller. Not Bobby Fuller 4, it was Bobby Fuller and the Fanatics.
Yeah.
And he quit. And so he came to Santa Fe with this guy named Joe Ritchie and this band. And I went to see him at the college there and was backstage, and he happened to say to me, he goes, "Dwayne, you ought to go to El Paso. Bobby Fuller's looking for a drummer to go to California, and because Dalton Powell, his drummer there, couldn't go because he was married and he was out of job.
Yeah.
So I went there, and I met Brandy Fuller, his brother.
Mm-hmm.
The first guy I met, and he says, "I hear you want to play in our band." And I said, "Yeah." And so the next day I auditioned for Bobby and Randy and Jim Reese.
Yeah.
And we played 4 songs. Luckily, they were all Freddie King songs, and I know how to play a shuffle pretty cool.
Yeah.
So he stops it in the middle of the 4th song, pulls me in his kitchen of his house, and he goes, "I like the way you play. You have potential. Would you be willing to go to California and play drums on my songs the way I want you to play?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "Are we leaving today?" So we played around El Paso for about a month or two, playing gigs in Carlsbad and Farmington, parts of Texas.
Yeah.
And then we took off for California.
Right, before we get to that story, can we go back and what sort of music was you listening to apart from country? Because I mean, I know last night or the other night you told me you saw Eddie Cochran play.
Yeah, I saw Eddie Cochran when I was younger, when I was in high school in Wichita, Kansas.
Did that have an influence on your life, seeing somebody like that?
No, not really. I enjoyed it because I was a dancer. My sister and I won a lot of dance contests.
Right.
So I had a lot of feeling in me. I have a lot of feel, so kind of blessed with that, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, no, but I mean, I was really infatuated by it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was really, really good.
Yeah.
And, but no, I had no, other than dance contests, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was in Denver, while learning to play, I would go to these nightclubs that were 3-2 bars that you could drink beer when you were 18.
Yeah.
And I would just watch the drummers. Mm-hmm. I'd order a beer and nurse it all night and just watch the drummer.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would just eat him up, in my brain. So
yeah.
And that's what that's what got me going.
Yeah. So
I knew
so the 50s rock and roll didn't really sort of get you going. It sort of,
other than the dancing part, no. I didn't have any idea. There was no musical background with me.
Yeah.
But after doing those dances with my sister and everything, I had this feel. But when I had, my dad bought me a set of drums, a Japanese set, and I just sat and brainstormed basically, and then met that blind piano player. And when I was, let's see, what was it? And when I got to Texas, playing country and everything, I ran into these guys, and you meet people as you're traveling all over. You kind of run into them again.
Of course,
and you draw up certain relationships. But I had no idea. And then when this friend of mine, Billy Webb, who played with Bobby Fuller, came to Santa Fe, told me I should go to see Bobby because he wants a drummer to go to California with him. And I had just started playing. I had never played rock, but that was my dream, to be a rock drummer.
Right.
After I had gotten into it.
Yeah.
So I went to El Paso. Jack Brookshire took me there in his Mustang with all my drums in it. And then Bobby hired me. We played around. We even played for LBJ here when he was running for president.
Really?
And so then we took off, went to California. We got to California. He had an acetate.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know what that is.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Copy of all of his songs. And him and Randy, when we got to California, we didn't have a place to stay, so we stayed with my mother.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, Bobby was going to Hollywood and my mother lived in Newport Beach, and he was going to Hollywood to shop the record. And he didn't get a bite, nothing.
Yeah.
So he'd come back, and this basically was the start of our career. Was he asked my brother, "Is there any place to play in Newport Beach?" And he said, "Yeah, there's a place called the Rendezvous Ballroom."
Right.
And it was so ironic because Bobby had a place in El Paso called the Rendezvous. It was a teen center that he owned.
Okay.
And then he shut it down. Well, we were in Newport Beach, so we went to this place, the Rendezvous Ballroom, on a Sunday, it was a surf place. The Shantays were the house band there.
Yeah.
And we were like there was about 10 groups, and we were the last group. And they were all like, surf guys. And so, but we played like Billy J. Kramer stuff at the time. I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
And so when it came our turn to audition, we got up on the bandstand and we played Beatles stuff, Billy J. Kramer stuff, Chuck Berry stuff, just stuff that Bobby knew. We played Freddie King stuff, and then we played our stuff.
Right.
Well, the guy was he just couldn't believe it, and so he kept us up there for an hour, and then he hired us.
Yep.
Well, it was Dick Dale's stomping grounds at the time.
Yeah.
And so we opened up there. And when we first opened up, we were backing up Sonny and Cher when they first came out. Wow. And we backed up Gloria Loring. I think the Safaris played there. They came there when we would play, and they would come on and they play. And then we played from Wednesday to Saturday through Saturday.
Yep.
So over a period of time, we've been there for about a month. And we came to work one night on a Wednesday night, and there were teens wrapped around the building all the way down Newport Boulevard. Couldn't even see the end of the line.
Right.
And Bobby says, well, who in the hell are we backing up tonight? We didn't know anything. Usually we're told,
Yeah.
So we get there to find out that they're there to see us.
Which must be very cool.
The amazing part of it was, pardon me?
It must have been a very cool feeling.
Oh, man, it was an unbelievable feeling.
Yeah.
And unbelievably so, that particular night, we beat Dick Dale's standing room only there.
Right.
And which was quite a feat in itself.
Yeah, I'm
So
sure.
then we left, and we, we were working there and staying at my mother's. Bobby was still shopping the estate. Finally, we got hooked up with Bob Keane at Delphi Records.
Yeah.
We had Richie Valens and Johnny Crawford and so on.
Yeah.
He had the lively ones. They were a surf band. They had a song called Surf Rider.
Yeah.
And so we got involved in that, and then we started recording, and then our first record was a Dick Dale song called Memories of You.
Yeah.
And basically, we were Bobby Fuller and the Fanatics at that time.
Yeah.
And we had no other name of the band. And one day we were going to record, and Randy and I showed up early, and the records were sitting on Millie, the secretary's desk. And Randy says, hey, the records are here.
Yeah.
That we had recorded Memories of You. It was our first record.
Yeah.
And so Randy says, let's look at it. And he comes up and pulls it at 45. And it says Bobby Fuller and Group. Randy mad. It was scary.
Yeah.
And he went to Bob Keene's office door and kicked it in, threw the 45 at him, and says, what the blank is that?
Yeah.
And Bob Keene goes, what's wrong, Randy? What's the matter? He says, well, Bobby Fuller isn't the only one that played on this record.
Yeah, of course.
And, he's his brother, so they,
Yeah.
So Bob Keene says, so Bobby shows up for the session that we were going to do that day when all this commotion is going on, and Bobby now, he didn't even know. I think Rob Keene was the one who did that.
Yeah.
Because, he was figuring Bobby as a single kind of. Anyway, it didn't work that way.
Yeah.
So Bobby said, well, let's go to his apartment. We were Miss Fuller, Bobby, and we were with our fan club president.
Yeah.
And we were shooting names around, and all of a sudden the fan club president says, well, why don't you just call yourselves the Bobby Fuller Four? You all four did it.
Yeah.
And there is why the name is Bobby Fuller Four.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
right, but tell us a bit more about Bobby Fuller himself.
Bobby excelled, was an excellent musician. Right. He was a drummer.
Yeah.
That was his main instrument. He was a very good drummer. Played at North Texas State in the jazz lab band there. He could read drum music. He could read music. He'd actually play anything. Play guitar, bass, played vibes.
Right.
And he was very talented. And he knew what he wanted, and he went and got it. That's exactly what he did. I mean, and I knew what I wanted, and it was like with a cool guy, you know, and he taught me things, and that was really cool. It was like I couldn't believe it was happening to me.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm sure.
So but I remember when we got to, when we first drove into Hollywood, Bobby was sitting in the front seat, and we had never been there. I mean, he had been there, but I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like glitter in the air. It was what it looked like.
Yeah.
And something just came over me. I don't know what it was. And I just reached up in the front seat, grabbed Bobby by the shoulder, and he turned around and says, "What?" And I said, "We're going to make it, dude."
Yeah.
Swear to God, that's what I said. And sure enough, wasn't too long after that, we did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, working with people like Bob Keane, who produced Richie Valens, you know, that must have been pretty cool anyway.
Oh, it was, because, you know, I mean, with, you know, Richie, it was like, you know, the day the music died, you know, Buddy Holly,
exactly. Yeah.
Big Bopper and him. I mean, it was like, I remember when that happened when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty traumatic thing for the whole world, really.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, because you were telling me Bobby Fuller was actually a big Buddy Holly fan. And
yeah, he actually recorded at Norman Petty Studios in Clovis, New Mexico, where Buddy Holly recorded.
Yeah.
Before I joined him, he had recorded there.
Okay.
But he also had a recording studio in his house.
Yeah. Okay.
And his mother and father were definitely behind him. It was so good.
Yeah.
He had it made. I mean, he owned El Paso. I'll tell you that right now. I remember there when I first joined him, I met a girl at one of our concerts, and we were smooching up on Skyline Drive, and the police came and shot lights, like, you know. And he said, "What are you guys doing up here?" You know, I'm going, "Well, you know, what does it look like?" And so he says, what do you do? I said, "Well, I'm Bobby Fuller's drummer." He says, "You're Bobby Fuller's drummer?"
Yeah.
He says, "Well, why don't you guys go somewhere else, make more profit?" He owned. I mean, he even has a street named after him there, Bobby Fuller Drive.
Really nice.
Yeah. Just like Lee Trevino does.
Yeah.
Lee Trevino has the name there.
Yeah. Yeah.
The golfer.
Yeah, but I mean, you were saying that he was a Buddy Holly fanatic. Hence, he recorded things like "I Fought the Law."
Oh yeah, he was. I mean, when we got to PJ's, that was a big celebrity club in Hollywood. When we finally got signed, and then we played at the Ambassador Hotel. The Law Cave Gal was the name of it.
Yeah.
And we started getting really big and more popular and more popular. And then, you know, Bob Keane decided to put us in PJ's, which was a huge nightclub. Right. And we just packed it to death. I mean, every night.
Yeah.
And then the owner of PJ's opened up a club called It's Boss on Sunset Boulevard.
Right.
And he wanted us to go there. So he, you know, PJ's had, you know, remember the Standells? They were playing there when we came in there.
Right, yeah.
What was the guy's name that did If I Had a Hammer? What was his name?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Mike, someone.
He was playing there.
Yeah.
The guy that did Memphis.
Yeah.
Memphis.
Lonnie Mack.
Lonnie Mack was.
Yeah.
That's who I learned to play drums from.
Right.
He was the instrumental. I mean, the guy that actually did the Memphis, you know, version of Chuck Berry's Memphis.
Ah, right. Okay. Yeah.
I can't remember his name. It doesn't matter. No. Anyway, it was, you know, he was playing at the Whiskey and at PJ's too. So, and then they had a jazz club in there. They had like 3 different bandstands in that club. And the front room was a bar with a jazz band in it. And in the back room was 2 bands, kind of like a Frank Sinatra kind of band, and then us. And the Standells played there. I met Dickie Dodd, who was the drummer in that band. We became great friends. And then we just started. It just started booming, man. It just, you know, we were signing autographs at the gym store, going down and with our record things set up there, and we had went to Huntington Beach and played in a theater actually, and it was a promotion for Bobby Fuller 4.
Yeah,
and then we were playing a song called "Let Her Dance."
Yep.
And Bobby had me doing some radical drum beat on the snare,
Mm-hmm.
and I hated it. So we went in the studio to record it, and we heard it back the first take. And I looked at Bobby and I said, "Don't you think that's a little busy?"
Yep.
He said, "Not only that, it sucked." So he and I compromised and, came up with the groove for Let Her Dance, which is, I think I told you this before, but there's no backbeat, 2/4 in it. It's mostly 8 notes on the right cymbal and the snare, and then my bass drum pattern is more with Randy on bass. Randy was a phenomenal bass player, phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was as good as his brother, if not better, really. Mm. And he actually wrote Let Her Dance.
Okay. Yep.
And then we did I Fought the Law after Let Her Dance, got on the charts. It moved, but it didn't sell a lot of records. It was
really?
Played a lot.
Yeah.
They called it a DJ hit.
Yeah.
If you know, I'm sure you know what that is.
Yeah.
It gets played, but when we went to the record stores to see the record sales, there were none. Mm. But when we put out I Fought the Law, mm-hmm. boom time.
Yeah.
It was
that was an absolutely massive hit.
Like a whole other world it set in.
Yeah. I mean, things like Love Made a Fool of You as well, that was a massive hit for you as well, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. It was so massive, it was an international hit.
Yeah.
And then I was living in Tucson, Arizona around 2014. Mm-hmm. In 2015, my wife calls me, mm-hmm. which we were divorced at the time.
Yeah.
And she says, "Guess what just happened to you?" I was shopping in a grocery store. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, give me the bad news first." Mm. She said, "There is no bad news." I said, "Well, what do you want?" And she said, "You were just inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame."
Nice.
I fell on the floor. I actually started crying.
Yeah.
Because Bobby wasn't there to see it.
Yeah.
He was murdered.
Yeah.
He did not commit suicide. He was murdered.
Let's talk about that. There's a lot of mystery around his death. There's stories about he committed suicide, and then there's others told about the mafia possibly knocked him off.
Yes, and basically it's an unsolved mystery. Mm-hmm. The people that were involved in it are dead now. Mm-hmm. And it started, Bobby got a call, I don't know, to help somebody put some gas in their car.
Right.
It was a girl that he knew.
Yeah.
And he left, and then Mrs. Fuller had said that he left around 10 in the evening, mm-hmm. something like that.
Yeah.
And he was in his pajamas, supposedly. That's what I heard. Because I wasn't with Bobby when he was murdered.
Yeah.
It was about 2 months after that when this happened.
Yeah.
And so, there was a writer in the L.A. Times who had already did an article about 4 pages in the L.A. Times that another rock and roll drug addict has committed suicide.
Yeah.
Bobby Fuller, and it was the most. I wanted to go down there and absolutely beat the hell out of the guy for saying it, because he didn't know what he was talking about.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of mystery behind it, because when Mrs. Fuller found Bobby in the car, and another thing, I mean, there's so much in this story that's hard to tell it, but he went out and helped his girlfriend get some gas.
Yeah.
The car was parked in a different place.
Right.
And he actually took the car, and when Mrs. Fuller found him the next day, when he didn't come back, he never told his mother, and she was worrying all night, found him dead in the parking lot of our apartment building. We were living at Sycamore Terrace Apartments.
Yeah.
And she found him, and it was just a freak up for her, because she had just gotten over another son that was murdered.
Right.
Her older son.
Yeah.
It was pretty tragic.
Mm-hmm.
So then there was all these people gathered around, suits. The police were there, reporters, whatever. Mm. And Bob King told me, the producer told me, that a cop got in there was gasoline strewn through the car. He had gasoline in his lungs. Mm-hmm. His hands were scuffed. His pants were undone. And it looked like he had been beaten. basically.
Yeah.
But he had gasoline. So, and then some friends of Texas of ours, a guy named Ty Grimes, a drummer, used to play for, he played for Ricky Nelson, and then another guitar player named Mike Ciccarelli, who was a kill guitar blues player, has driven in from El Paso to L.A. to see us. And they said that they drove up that morning with all these, there wasn't anybody there yet. They saw the car, and then they were pulling into the parking lot, and there was a guy standing there, and they said, "Hey, Bobby," because they thought it was Bobby.
Yeah.
And the guy took off running.
Mm-hmm.
That was never ever said any more than that.
Yeah.
And then the police showed up, and Bob told me they were looking in the car, and there was a gas can in the back seat, still with gasoline in it.
Right.
Took it out and threw it into the trash bin. Bob Keane says, "What are you doing? That's evidence."
Mm.
And then, to this day, you cannot get a police report on it.
No, it's just terrible.
The police.
Yeah.
It was horrifying. I mean, it was.
Yeah.
For someone to say Bobby Fuller committed suicide or wanted to is a bunch of BS.
Yeah.
Bobby Fuller knew what he wanted, and he was about 5 seconds from getting it.
Yeah.
So I don't think people want to kill themselves when they're about to become a superstar.
No, that's right. Yeah, I've heard stories that he didn't want to go solo, but you were telling me he did want to go solo.
He did. That was his goal. We had talked about it over beer one time.
Yeah.
And he said that, I'd like to get into acting because he had met all these actors, during our time at PJ's and Linda Evans and stuff like that. I used to talk to Linda Evans every night when we went to work.
Yep, nice.
Yeah, she was beautiful.
Yeah.
And just the coolest lady in the world.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, he wanted to do it. He wanted to be a rock star.
Yeah.
But I walked in a session one time when I was supposed to record one day. I had gotten there. I always came in early because I would practice on my drums to get warmed up and just practice things I wanted to learn.
Yeah.
And I walked in, and Bob Keane and Bobby were arguing. I've never seen Bobby that infuriated.
Yeah.
He was just beside himself. And I left. I turned around. I said, "I don't want to be here." So I turned around. I left. And there was rumors of the band breaking up. And basically, I really didn't care because I wanted to be a session drummer. That was my really goal at that point.
Yeah.
I figured that I thought Bobby Fuller for stuff with bubble gum. You don't know the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, I really did. It really wasn't, but that was how I felt about it.
Yeah.
And I said I wanted to move on like he wanted to move on.
Yeah.
Well, I heard that when they went to New York, they would get a plate thing called the Hall of Blue there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they recorded live on that show.
Right.
And he met, Larry Nunes was the same guy behind us.
Mm-hmm.
Larry Nunes, Barry White involved at Delphi. I did a lot of Barry White sessions that he was producing, like Felice Taylor, Viola Wells. I played on those albums.
Yeah.
And then he produced it, and then Bob Keane didn't know what he had.
Yeah.
And Barry White was very disturbed by it. And Barry White was about one of the most talented people I've ever met in my life.
Really?
He could play drums.
Yeah.
He could play piano.
Yeah.
He could sing. He could write. He could produce. He could, he knew the board. He was just a genius, really. And Larry Nunes made him a superstar.
Yeah.
And then Larry Nunes was involved with a guy named, trying to think of his name, probably isn't not good to say it, but it was a guy in New York.
Yeah.
And Bobby was supposed to sell the song "Let Her Dance" to him for $50,000.
Right.
And then I heard Ahmed Erdi approach Bobby and said that he wanted to sign him to Atlantic Records, but he didn't want the band. And this Irving guy, his name is something Irving, I forget it.
Yeah.
And I really don't want to remember his name,
No,
really.
it doesn't really matter.
And he was involved, he was a mafia guy. Yeah. Larry Nunes was in the mafia, Greek. He was Greek.
Yeah.
There was money. It was always a rumor. We never ever met any of those people, that were behind those doors, but they were running the show. And Larry Nunes came into our studio recording one night, pulled us out of the session and pulled us into the control room and said, poured us a glass of scotch. I didn't even drink. And he goes, hands us a glass of scotch, and he says, "Here, we'll toast you all. You're going to be known 1 month from now nationwide."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm looking at, how could you say that? And anyway, it happened.
Yeah.
Not quite. It was a lot longer than a month, but it happened.
Yeah.
And, it was just a lot of weird stuff.
Yeah.
And then Armand Ertegun wanted to record Let Her Dance, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I think that was our best song, personally.
Yeah. Where do you think the Bobby Fuller Four would have gone, if they'd stayed together and Bobby had lived?
I think that Bobby would have disbanded and moved on by himself.
Yeah.
Although his mother told Bobby that if you go anywhere, she knew about this. She knew everything about it.
Yeah.
And she said, if you go anywhere, you take your brother Randy.
Yeah, of course.
And he, I think that was the problem. And this Levy, Morris Levy, that's his name.
Yeah.
He said, I think he called all the people that were involved trying to get Bobby and told them, this is my guy, don't mess with him.
Yeah, yeah.
And mostly those people in those record companies, they don't want to be involved in that.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Somebody says stay away, they will,
Yeah, yeah.
They don't,
Right.
worried about getting beat up or something.
Have you got any messages for all the Bobby Fuller fans out there?
Oh, yeah, we got a site called the Bobby Fuller 4 site.
Right.
The official site.
Mm-hmm.
We have fans that weren't even born, 2 decades ago or 3 decades. And they hear the song on the internet.
Yep.
And they fell in love with it.
Yeah.
Become members. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, music is still going to this day.
Yeah.
And it was good music. I mean, we played good. We were real good.
Mm-hmm.
When we played live, we played exactly like we sounded on the record.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is how
probably
it should
better.
Be. Yeah, that's how it should be, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I think being in the studio really makes you do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, you really don't overplay it, this and that. You just play what the song calls for.
Yeah.
And get it in the pocket and lay it down.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in the 70s and the 80s, records become so overproduced that you could never, ever produce them on stage.
No,
not exactly
a lot of them
the same.
couldn't. In fact, back then, they were, playing the record and they would pantomime it.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
And 90% of the time, the people they were on stage with wasn't the band that we recorded with.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Well, thank you for coming on, Robert. And
I'm glad you asked me, man. I got
worries.
so much inside to say, but it's so hard to say it in a half an hour or so.
Oh, of course.
And I really thank you a lot, man, for keeping his name alive and asking me to give this interview.
No
I
worries.
said, because Bobby deserves more than being remembered as he committed suicide.
Exactly.
I think that's the worst thing I could ever think of. If Bobby Fuller did not commit suicide.
Yeah.
He was murdered. And one thing I'll leave you with, I want to say this. There's a guy that I know, a friend of mine, is an artist that lives in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing a animation Bobby Fuller 4 story.
Right.
Yeah, and it's called California Sun. Mm-hmm. And right now, animated movies are real popular.
Yep.
So you might even know the guys, but I'm not going to drop names right now.
Yeah, no.
I will say his name is Rudy Mercado.
Right.
And great artist, great talent.
Yep.
But anyway, I'm really glad that you asked me to do this. I'm kind of nervous right now.
No problems. No problems.
Trying to fish for all the right things to say.
Well, thank you for coming on, and we'll speak again real soon, yeah?
Oh, by the way, I'll leave you with this. I still play and I still kick ass.
Yes, of course. Of course, you've got to, haven't you?
Yeah.
Right, well, we're going to finish up with Love Makes a Fool of You by the Bobby Fuller 4, of course, including yourself. So, okay then, Robert.
All right, Dave. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on. Bye for now.
Thank you for asking.
Bye-bye.